In the United States, arrest does not always follow violence. Every year, thousands of people are taken into custody without harming anyone, or even realizing they broke the law. Many of these arrests begin with ordinary moments. A car parked for too long. A walk taken at the wrong hour. A post shared online without a second thought. As images of police lights flash across the screen, handcuffs click shut, not on criminals, but on everyday Americans, drivers, tourists, commuters, phone users. These are not rare edge cases. They are legal realities, quietly enforced, rarely explained, and often misunderstood. And some of them may already apply to you. Stay with us until the end. Because the final example reveals how following the law, incorrectly, can still lead to arrest. This video is for educational purposes only. It is not legal advice, and it should not be used as a substitute for guidance from a qualified attorney. Laws in the United States are not uniform. What is legal in one state, or even one city, may be an arrestable offense in another. Enforcement also varies, often depending on local policy and officer discretion. Our goal here is not to create fear, but awareness. To document how everyday laws operate in real life, and how easily they can be misunderstood. The examples that follow are organized deliberately. We begin with situations many people encounter without a second thought, and gradually move toward cases that are less obvious, but far more consequential. Understanding where these lines are drawn can make the difference between going home and being taken into custody. Great, I'll continue in the same documentary tone, section by section. Here are the next 3 segments, fully rewritten for narration. For many Americans, a parked car feels like a private space. A place to rest, make a phone call, or wait for someone to arrive. But in certain cities and counties, sitting in a vehicle for too long can attract police attention, especially if the engine is off, the location is residential, or the time is late at night. Loitering laws, anti-vagrancy ordinances, and local parking regulations allow officers to question why a vehicle has remained stationary. In some jurisdictions, sleeping in a car, even briefly, can be grounds for citation or arrest. These encounters often begin casually. A knock on the window. A routine question. But depending on the location, the response, and local enforcement priorities, they can escalate quickly. What feels like harmless waiting can, under the law, be interpreted very differently. Jaywalking is widely seen as a minor nuisance, if it's considered at all. Yet in many states, it remains a citable offense, and in rare but documented cases, a reason for arrest. Originally introduced in the early 20th century to regulate traffic flow, jaywalking laws are still on the books in most major cities. And while enforcement may be inconsistent, police stops for jaywalking are still legal in many jurisdictions. These stops matter because they rarely end with the crossing itself. A request for identification. A records check. An unrelated warrant or violation. What begins as stepping off a curb can quickly become something far more serious, not because of the act itself, but because of what the stop allows legally. In the United States, the right to record in public is protected, but not unlimited. Courts have repeatedly affirmed that citizens may film police officers performing their duties in public spaces. However, this right is often misunderstood, and frequently misapplied. Restrictions can apply when recording interferes with an investigation, violates trespassing laws, or occurs near sensitive government facilities. Many arrests stem not from filming itself, but from where the person was standing, how close they were, or whether an officer determined the activity to be obstructive. The result is confusion on both sides. A right that exists on paper can still lead to arrest in practice, especially when its boundaries are unclear. Below are the next 5 sections, written to carry attention, not just explain rules. Most people don't think twice about what they carry with them. A pocket knife. A screwdriver. A heavy flashlight kept in a glove compartment. Individually, these objects are legal, common, unremarkable. But under certain state laws, legality changes when intent is inferred. In many jurisdictions, officers are permitted to determine whether an object is being carried as a tool, or as a weapon. That judgment is often made on the spot, based on context, time of day, location, prior behavior, or answers given during questioning. No crime has to occur. No threat has to be made. The object itself becomes secondary. What matters is how it is perceived. This is why two people can carry the same item, and face very different outcomes. There is a widespread belief that Americans are never required to identify themselves to police. The reality is more complicated. In what are known as stop and identify states, a person who is lawfully detained may be required to provide their name. Failure to do so can result in arrest, even if no other crime has occurred. The confusion lies in the distinction between a voluntary encounter, a detention, and an arrest. These moments often look identical to the person experiencing them. A simple question. A pause. An assumption. When someone believes they are asserting a right, law enforcement may interpret the same action as non-compliance. And once that line is crossed, the legal justification for arrest can follow. Trespassing is often imagined as deliberate, crossing fences, ignoring warnings, forcing entry. But many trespassing arrests involve none of that. Parking lots that close after hours. Beaches restricted by time or season. Private property with unclear signage. In many states, a verbal warning from an officer is enough to establish a notice. Remaining after that warning, even briefly, can constitute trespassing. Tourists are particularly vulnerable. So are delivery drivers. So is anyone unfamiliar with local ordinances. The law does not always require intent, only presence. And presence alone can be enough. Disorderly conduct laws exist in nearly every state. They are broad by design. Originally intended to preserve public order, these statutes often rely on vague terms. Unreasonable noise. Disturbing the peace. Offensive behavior. What qualifies is often subjective. A heated argument. A raised voice. Refusing to leave an area quickly enough. In moments of tension, disorderly conduct becomes one of the most commonly cited reasons for arrest, not because it clearly applies, but because it is flexible. It is a law that fills gaps. And in those gaps, discretion becomes decisive. In the digital age, words travel farther, and last longer, than ever before. Messages intended as sarcasm. Comments written without context. Private texts forwarded without permission. Under state and federal law, threats do not always require intent to carry them out. They only need to be perceived as credible by a recipient or authority. Schools, employers, and law enforcement agencies are required to act cautiously, and that caution often results in arrests made preemptively. What once might have been dismissed as a bad joke is now preserved, time-stamped, and legally actionable. Online, there is no tone of voice. And there are few second chances. In the United States, freedom of movement is a constitutional right. But the laws governing what you can carry do not travel with you. An item purchased legally in one state can become contraband the moment you cross a border. Firearms and ammunition are the most well-known examples, but far from the only ones. Prescription medications, legal cannabis, even certain knives can trigger arrest when state lines are crossed. Many of these cases begin with routine traffic stops. A question. A disclosure made in good faith. The law does not account for intent or ignorance. It accounts for jurisdiction. And jurisdiction changes quickly. One of the most misunderstood concepts in American law is compliance. Compliance does not mean guilt. It does not mean admission. And it does not mean surrendering your rights. It means following lawful orders in the moment, then challenging them later through the legal system. refusing to step back, arguing on the roadside, demanding explanations before complying. These actions, even when legally motivated, often escalate encounters rather than resolve them. The street is not a courtroom, and officers are granted wide authority to maintain control of a situation. In many arrests, the original issue is irrelevant. What matters is how the moment unfolded. Curfews are commonly associated with teenagers, but many cities impose curfews on everyone. These restrictions are often enacted temporarily, during emergencies, civil unrest, or public health events. Others exist year-round in specific zones. The problem is visibility. Curfew notices may be posted briefly, announced once, or buried in local government websites. Violating them can result in citation, or arrest, depending on enforcement policy. Many people learn a curfew exists only after being stopped for violating it. Criminal responsibility does not always require direct action. Under aiding and abetting laws, assisting someone, even unintentionally, can be enough. Giving a ride, letting someone use your phone, holding on to an item temporarily. If law enforcement determines that assistance contributed to a crime, charges can follow. In these cases, intent is often secondary to outcome. What matters is whether help was provided, and whether it mattered. Many arrests have nothing to do with new crimes. They begin with something forgotten. A traffic ticket never paid. A court date missed. A fine assumed resolved. Over time, these issues can result in bench warrants, often issued without further notice. Years later, during a background check or routine stop, the warrant surfaces. The arrest feels sudden, but legally, it has been waiting. In an age of smartphones, documenting surroundings feels natural. But certain locations remain restricted under federal and state law. Military installations, critical infrastructure, transportation hubs. Photography near these sites can trigger suspicion, questioning, and arrest, particularly if intent is unclear. In these cases, the concern is not what you captured, but why. And authorities rarely wait for certainty before acting. The final example is also the most unsettling. Many arrests occur not because someone ignored the law, but because they misunderstood it. Partial compliance, outdated information, assumptions passed along as fact, saying the wrong thing, standing in the wrong place, asserting a right at the wrong moment. The law rewards precision, and it rarely excuses error. In these cases, no warning is given, because the law assumes you already know. In the United States, arrest is not always about wrongdoing. It is often about timing, location, interpretation. The difference between freedom and custody can be narrow, and invisible. Understanding where those lines exist does not guarantee safety. But not knowing them almost guarantees surprise.